Well, hello and welcome in to the New Normal podcast. My name is Ryne. I am a youth pastor here in the Northern Virginia area, and today I have one of my students here with me, Luke, and we're going to be talking about how to live for Christ as a homeschooler. And so if you are a homeschooler, then this podcast episode is for you. If you are not a homeschooler, this podcast episode is for you because we're going to talk about some things that not only just apply to homeschoolers, but just apply to everybody because homeschoolers are real people too. Right, Luke?
Yeah, we are.
Maybe. But we'll find out. We'll let you judge for yourself. But we're excited for today's episode, excited to dive into it. As always, the New Normal podcast just simply exists to encourage, train, and equip students to live for Christ and to share his message with those around them. And so we're excited today to do just that. So stay tuned for today's episode. All right, now, Luke, congrats. You're the second middle school guy we've had on the podcast. So it's been fun just to see the differences between middle school guys and high school girls and high school guys.
Big
and
difference.
Yeah, they're all very different. But you are not the first homeschooler we've had on this podcast. And youth group, I think we have a pretty good mix of homeschoolers and Christian school kids.
Probably about a third of it, yeah.
Yeah. That was actually the number that I was thinking of too. So good job. But yeah, I think this is a big topic that is really important because we'll get into it a little bit more. But essentially, yeah, it's kind of like I think sometimes homeschoolers don't understand public school and public school doesn't understand homeschool. They're like, what do you do all day? And you're like, well, what do you do all day? Right. So I'm excited to get to see that, hey, no matter where we are, we all kind of face the same things. But before we get into that, I would love for you to share about your walk with Christ, your relationship with Jesus, kind of what was life like before that? When did you make that decision, or when did you really understand that, what all Jesus did for you? And then kind of how has life been different since? Or maybe there was another point, like maybe you trusted Christ and you kind of were going with emotions in that, but then there was a point where like you really understood, like, okay, this is how this changes everything.
That's probably what happened.
Okay, so go ahead, share that for our listeners.
I was probably around 4 or 4.5 when I trusted Christ, but I don't really know what life was like before then because it was so long ago.
Yeah.
And but like afterward, I was thinking about him more. I was trying to read my Bible more, pray more probably, and and then but I didn't really fully understand, like you said, but later on I did recommit my life, commit my life to him again, and accept him again. And then that's when I really started reading my Bible more, doing more studies and praying more. And I think that's when, it was probably around the age of probably 9 when I really understood and was at the age of accountability probably.
Yeah. That's cool, man. So how do you feel like, again, I'm in a similar boat. Like I trusted Christ when I was 7.
Yeah.
So I kind of use this example in youth group. Like I wasn't out roaming the streets at age 7. Like I wasn't getting into trouble with like police or anything like that. Point being,
I mean, I might have when I was little.
Yeah, you never know. There was definitely times where I roamed the streets in terms of ran out of the house as a little kid or stuff like that. But I don't really remember before that. So how do you kind of look at your life and kind of be like, hey, even though I don't remember much before I trusted Christ, I still know my life is different because of Jesus.
Yeah.
What kind of in your life can you kind of point to be like, not necessarily comparing yourself to others, but just in general, like, hey, if it weren't for Jesus, this would probably be really different. How would you kind of answer that?
I would probably be, I don't know, I wouldn't be thinking about him as much. I wouldn't be trying to make good decisions based on what he'd want me to do.
Yeah.
I probably, that's probably it. And then, I wouldn't be as good a person. I think I'd without Jesus, he makes me a better person, I think. So without him, it would just be chaos in my life probably.
Yeah. Maybe organized chaos, but still nonetheless chaos. Yeah. And we know that God makes us a better person, not in terms of, again, not comparison, but just because he makes us more like him, right? And that's what we were originally created for. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing. Now, yes, we are talking about how to live for Christ as a homeschooler. And I think this one's interesting because I think most people are like, well, it's got to be so much easier to live for Christ as a homeschooler.
But like homeschoolers, we just get like a bad stereotype. Everyone thinks we're like weird and sheltered, but that's not the case. Like we're normal people who just like go to a different school. I mean, we just do our school at home.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, but like everyone just thinks we're like weird, like some weirdos who like don't know how to socialize or talk to anyone, but that's not true.
Spoiler alert: there are some weird kids in public school too.
Yeah, it's basically it's the parents' fault. Like if their kids are weird, it's probably because of the parents.
Well, we're all a little weird, and so when I say there's weird kids everywhere, my point is like, there's the same struggle in public school. Is the same struggle in homeschool. Now it plays out differently, and we do want to be honest about that. But my point being like, some people are just not super socialized. Some people are bigger introverts, some people, but that's across the board no matter where you are. But there are specific struggles that homeschoolers deal with. That public schoolers don't deal with, or Christian schoolers don't deal with, and vice versa. What made you pick this topic? I know you said you do kind of want to be like, hey, look, like we can be normal people too. Like we're not all just, but like why pick this topic? Why look at that list and decide this is what I want to talk about?
Because I want people to know that homeschoolers can live for Christ just as well as any public schooler. Like, and that we're normal people too. Like, just because we can't witness to as many people doesn't mean we can't live our life for Christ. Like for me, I try and read my Bible every day. It's still living for Christ, but I just don't like for my like my family. We are not around many non-believers because we go to like a Christian a co-op, and so we don't have the chance to witness as much, but we can still live our life for Christ just as much.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about that in our next question. I think that you kind of alluded to, but I think why I'm excited to talk about this is there's this misconception in Christianity where the tendency is to fall into this false belief, which is, hey, the world is bad, and I'm good. And it's like,
it's not very true.
Yeah, no, the Bible actually says, no. The world is evil, but so are you.
Yeah.
And so we can easily fall into this trap of, hey, well, the world is bad. Therefore, if we just protect ourselves,
we're good.
Then we're going to be okay. The reality is it's not true. The reality is, hey, we are sinful by nature. Yeah. The enemy is not outside. The enemy is actually within. Even once I trust Christ, he has given me victory over that sinful nature.
You're still sinning, but he just says, cover that sin. He's forgiven you for that sin.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. And so what I think sometimes the tendency to fall in with either looking outside in at homeschool or, inside out, like being a homeschooler, is this kind of false sense of security of like, oh, well, I'm not around all that stuff, therefore I don't have to worry about it. The reality is that the world is everywhere, especially with technology. You don't have to go to an evil place to be exposed to evil. Like the technology has brought everything to the front door. And so these same things that it used to be you might not have been exposed to, now everybody's exposed to because everybody has a phone or Netflix or YouTube or whatever, music. So it's kind of more of an even playing field. And so I think we can't lull ourselves into a false sense of security of, oh, we'll just protect ourselves and everything will be okay. We need to understand that, like, hey,
we need to set some standards, like don't do this, like.
Well, yeah, we need to understand that, like, hey, I might not be around people cussing all the time, but like
you might still do it.
Correct. Yeah. And then the other thing too, I think is, and it goes very heavily into that, but I think a lot of times the sense with that belief is, okay, well, the world is evil, therefore we need to defend our faith. Hey, we need to know what we believe so we can defend it. Hey, we need to protect our home so we can defend it against evil.
That's true, but we want to go about it in a loving way, and
Well, and too, okay, sports fan here. Although you're a Philly fan, so we won't talk about that. But
hey, we're better than you guys.
Oh man. But hey, defense. There's also offense, and what's interesting is a lot of times we fall into this like, well, we just need to be defensive against the evil, that's out there. The reality is, no. Jesus commands us to go on the offensive.
Sharing Christ. And going on and making disciples and the Great Commission. Yeah,
absolutely. But also Matthew 16:8. I'm sure you've heard this verse before, but somebody shared this with me the other day, and in a different way that kind of clicked with me. Matthew 16:18, and I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So what's interesting here is when we think the gates of hell can't prevail against it, we mean, hey, the gates of hell can't, prevail against the church. No. The reality is that when we go on the offense, the gates of hell cannot prevail against us going on the offense. Meaning, the devil already has this world in the sense that we're all born in sin.
Yeah.
And so think about this. The devil, okay, crazy enough, the devil doesn't need to go on offense. He can just try and play defense, trying to keep what he has. Yeah. And so we as Christians,
away from God, and
correct. If we as Christians, if we just play defense, then guess what? The devil's like, great. Like, you're giving me all of this to do. And okay, you stay with your religion inside your house and your church. As long as it stays in there, man, I'm happy, right? But we are called to go on the offense. Now, we need to make sure that we can defend against the enemy schemes.
Apologetics. And
correct. Yeah. Absolutely. But the reality is, if we just kind of shut ourselves in and say, hey, the world's bad, we're good, let's just do it this way.
No one's going to get saved that way.
Correct. We are called to go. I mean, God doesn't need us. He can do whatever he wants, but the commission is to go. So I think that's one of the big things that I think of this as well, is like that idea of not falling into a false sense of security just because we're not around those things. So what are the challenges? We've touched on it, but what are the challenges for living for Christ as a homeschooler? What might be more difficult as a homeschooler?
Yeah, like what I said, you can't, you're not around people that bad, so you don't get to witness, you don't get to
So how do we How do we combat that? Like, a little spoiler alert for our second question, but we'll get into it. How do we combat that? Like, how do you combat not being able to witness?
I mean, like, I can still get to witness to I work in the children's ministry on Sunday, so I can still witness to those kids, and I try to as best I can, and
so. Absolutely. Yeah, I think Matthew 28, which you alluded to, the Great Commission. So the ESV translates it, go therefore and make disciples of all nations. But it could also be translated, go into the world and make disciples of all nations. And so this idea that, we have to go. We can't just stay, we have to go. And so I think the challenge can be, hey, if I don't have any non-Christian friends, biblically, that's a problem.
Yeah, you need to start making more friends so you can lead them to Christ and go out of your way to make those friends. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul says, I become all things to all men so I may win them to Christ. Yeah. And so that's the thing. I remember when we kind of had a shift in our youth group a couple of years ago, and I remember talking with the homeschoolers or the Christian schoolers, and they're like, we don't have any non-Christian friends. And we were like, okay, well that's an issue. And they're like,
but just because we're around people who are from Christian families doesn't mean they're necessarily Christians.
Yes.
I mean, like, I've asked some of my friends, but some of them I think that might not be Christians. But
yeah, no, absolutely. That's the big thing. Is like, hey, well, I'm only around Christians. Like, well, how do you know? Well, they go to church. They do. Yeah. It's like,
hey, ask them, like, try and have a conversation with them about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't want to assume salvation on anybody, and I think that's a big struggle with being a homeschooler. Is you just kind of assume, well, I'm in this church environment or I'm in this co-op. Everybody believes the same thing, and it's like, okay, hold on, time out.
But do they? Yeah.
You need to really ask that question. Yeah, I think another one, just to touch on real quick. I think homeschool can be tougher on, isolation and loneliness, just because you're not around as many people, and that depends on the person. Like, that's not just homeschool.
Yeah.
But for me, okay, I am a fellow homeschooler, and the fact that I was homeschooled for half of kindergarten. But
I don't know if that really counts. But
well, my mom made it to 6th grade with my oldest sister, my 4th grade with my other sister, and then I entered into kindergarten, and I was such a problem child that she was like, I can't do this anymore. And so that was God's timing. He put us in the public school. So I like to joke that, like, hey, I'm a homeschooler too, but only half a kindergarten.
But being a homeschooler, being as a homeschooler, living in a Christian family, you learn how to be a Christian, defend your faith, so that when you grow up, you can share the gospel more. You can, defend your faith in a loving way, and know how, know the Bible enough so that, that you can answer, the tough questions and stuff. And
and I want to double click on something you said, because you said when I grow up, but the reality is, and this, but God wants you to start now, right? Like, if 80% of Christians trusted Christ before the age of 18, well, then we need to be doing that now. And I think that's the difficult part. That is a difficult part to figure out. Okay, how do we, as a homeschooler, be a part of that world? And that takes intentionality. That takes being intentional about, like you said.
You got to try and make those relationships with people. You got to go out of your way, go out of your comfort zone.
Yep, absolutely. And you might not, correct, you might not get as many chances to witness as somebody. Like if you go to public school here, you're around thousands of kids.
Yeah.
You have, don't get me wrong, like you're surrounded by more non-believers, but that doesn't even necessarily mean that they'll have more opportunities, because guess what? The only opportunities that matter are the ones you take.
Yeah. If you don't care, then you're not going to have those opportunities. Like
absolutely, if you're not looking for them. Yeah. So okay. So we've talked about it a little bit. I think isolation and loneliness for that kid who's really outgoing to be homeschooled, sometimes that can be really tough for them. So we have to be intentional about making sure that there is a community aspect, right? Just like a kid who's really reserved going to public school, that's really difficult for them. It depends on the person and the student, right? Okay. So we've talked about intentionality, and we've talked about making non-Christian friends so that we can witness to them, going into the world, as we've talked about. What are some practical ways we can actually do that? Like, what does that actually look like? What are, homeschoolers listening right now, they're saying, hey, I don't have any Christian friends, or I don't have any opportunities to witness. Like, what are some ways that they can begin to maybe make some changes there so they can live for Christ by going on offense, not just defense?
Yeah, I mean, you could start by talking to your friends, seeing if they actually are Christians. I mean, you can talk to your neighbors or something. They might not be Christians. Even at the youth group here, you can come, and not everyone's a Christian. So yeah, you can just try and make more friends, and ask them about if they believe that, if they've accepted Him, and if not, you can help them in their you can help them to come to know Him. And if they have, you can help them in their walk with Christ. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I would build on that to say too, it's like, okay, every kid's different, right? But hey, you're homeschooled. Do you play sports? And I have to be careful. Some people are like, yes, I do, for a homeschool team. And it's like, okay, hey, same thing. Like, not everybody, you can't just assume, Christianity on everybody. Okay, well, so you play sports. Well, do you play sports in a rec league or travel or whatever? Like, hey, that is your witnessing. Like, that's the place that you can witness, right? Hey, once you get older, do you have a job? Like, do you have coworkers? Are you being intentional about, having a job, so that you can be around non-Christians? Yeah. Are you taking more opportunities to get out in your neighborhood and
get to know people?
Yep. Yeah. Make friends with, other kids. Are you intentional about going to youth group and not just saying, well, I'm homeschooled, so I don't
have to do this.
Correct.
It doesn't apply to me.
Yeah. So I think the big one is just being intentional and going about it. Do you play sports? If not, guess what? Try and start playing sports. Or, hey, do you have a hobby? No, well then try and, get into a hobby for that point. Hey, do you have a job? Hey, well, no, we'll find, even if it's just knocking on doors. Yeah. If it's just knocking on doors, cutting grass, look for opportunities to try and create them. And guess what? Here's the reality. If you're more intentional about creating opportunities, you'll be more intentional about taking opportunities. Like when I know, hey, I really want to make this opportunity, this effort so that I can share Christ with them, I'm going to be more focused on actually sharing the gospel with them rather than if it's just my friend who I've known forever and I haven't really thought about it. Yeah. The other thing I would say, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this one. If I'm homeschooled, you get a lot more work done in a lot less time. That's just the reality, right? We know
probably
in public school, there's a lot of wasted time. Now, that's not to say that teachers are bad. That's not to say anything other than I've been in public school before. I know how much time is behavioral or settling down.
For homeschooling, you can go at your own pace. You don't need to speed. In public school, you can't speed up, slow down. You have to go at the pace of the class.
Yep.
But
So how do you, as somebody who maybe gets your work done by 11 or 12 o'clock?
I get it done in the afternoon now that sometime in the afternoon,
Okay. But you would absolutely admit you probably have more free time.
Yeah, probably,
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you, as a homeschooler who has more free time, how do you make sure that free time isn't just, and I'm not saying it is, but making sure it isn't just watching TV or, how do you make sure that you're actually being productive?
Even when I'm doing school, I have we always, in the mornings, we always have a designated Bible time. So where we read our Bible, it's probably about 30, 40 minutes. And we just we study the Bible and we're currently doing like a study in John. So
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's what I would say is like you need to be structured with that time.
Yeah, it's become like a habit now that we do it like pretty much every day.
Yeah, because if I like get up and I'm just in my PJs and then I roll downstairs and I kind of do my work and I finish by like noon and then it's like,
you have nothing else to do.
yeah, you know, so you want to make sure that you're being structured, you're being productive. And that's where I think hobbies are a big thing. Like dude, if you have extra time, you'll realize this one day when you're an adult. Like I wish so much that I had extra time to just go learn a skill or a hobby or do something. So when you're young and you do have that time, like use that to your advantage. Hey, build a skill so that you can use that for living for Christ. You know, be productive with your hands, or hey, you know, just start, you know, learning different technology or skill. Like be productive with that time so that way we can make the hours count that God has given us. And I think that's a big one. So yeah, man, I appreciate you know, you just being willing to talk about this. Is there anything else you'd add before we kind of move into our 1 minute question? Is there anything that you wanted to say that you didn't get to, or just anything else?
I don't really think so. I think we covered it all.
Man, look at us. We got all of it. We didn't miss anything. So, but yeah, okay. All right. Awesome. Well, we're going to move into our 1 minute question. Okay. And the purpose of this is just for students to get to ask a question that they have, or maybe a friend has, or maybe just they think is a common question. And I'm going to do my best to answer it in 1 minute. So don't get mad if you're watching this and you're like, but that you missed so many things. It's like, hey, I had 1 minute to do it. Okay. So I'm going to put myself on the clock. You did let me know this question ahead of time, so I was able to kind of prepare some thoughts.
I could just hit you with a whole new question.
You could. You're welcome to do that if you want to. And
okay,
then,
I'll stick.
And the first 20 seconds will be, but all right. You ready? Mm-hmm. Go for it. What's your question?
So a common question that people normally ask is, why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah. Okay. Number one, this sounds harsh. Nobody's good. Scripture says there's no one righteous, no, not one.
That's true.
So we kind of use good comparatively, but the reality is if the standard is God, guess what? None of us are good. We all fall short, as Romans 3:23 says. So knowing that there is no good person, we understand that we all mess up.
And we're all sinners, yeah.
So sometimes bad things happen because we mess up. Sometimes bad things happen because somebody else messes up. Sometimes bad things happen because we live in a world that is messed up, disease, sickness, and sometimes the devil attacks us, and those can be bad things. So that's kind of where they come from. The big thing I would come back to is the worst thing to ever happen happened to the best person, and that was Jesus. And so when he died on the cross, he was innocent. He didn't deserve it. That was the only time that a bad thing happened to a good person. But even God used that for his glory and for his good.
It was all for his good, and it helped us. Like now we can trust in him, and we can spend an eternity with God.
Yep. Amen. So, dude, look at us. Between the two of us, we were still under a minute. So, yeah, man, it's a big one. And there's, I want to do an episode just on that actually here soon, because I think that's a big one. A lot
of people always have that question. Yeah.
It's a big objection to, is God real? It's like, if God's real, why is there so much evil? Why is there so much suffering? And that's a tough one. It's not one. It deserves more than a minute, but I think that's a good place to start. So
quickly cover it, yeah.
Yeah. Well, awesome, Luke. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I appreciate you guys for taking the time to watch. Again, whether or not you're homeschool, Christian school, public school, we're all sinful. We've all messed up, and the world is not evil, and we are good. We have all attributed in some aspect because we have all fallen short. And so the only hope for us is Jesus. The only hope is placing our faith in him, and he is faithful and just to cleanse us of all unrighteousness, to forgive us, and to start a relationship with him. And that starts the moment we ask for his forgiveness and place our faith in what he did for us on the cross. So if you haven't done that, we would love to hear about that. We'd love for you to do that, and then for you to share that with us. If you have done that, then begin this journey of living for Christ and taking that message of hope to those who need to hear it, which is everybody around us. And so we thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see y'all next time.